Merry Christmas, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated. John Bryce is from Football Scoop, also does some work for Irish Illustrated. And Pete Sampson of The Athletic. Notre Dame 27-17 victory over Indiana in the Friday night playoff game in Notre Dame Stadium. We all know it wasn't nearly that close. Credit to Indiana for hanging in there, but man, the first 55 minutes were all Notre Dame. We will get to the news. There is news about Riley Mills and his injury that he suffered against Indiana. We'll get to that in a bit. But guys, Notre Dame should have scored. It should have been the ninth game in a row that Notre Dame scored in the 30s, which would have equaled what Charlie Weiss's 2005 team did. Could have actually been in the 40s, quite frankly, if they had taken advantage of their early field position at the start of the second half. But it was thorough. Notre Dame did what they needed to do and prove the point that they wanted to show that they were the more physical team, and they certainly did that.
I'd say Xavier Watts' pick and Jeremiah Love's run back to back is the most definitive, well, that's it moment for a 7-0 game you will ever have in a playoff situation because Indiana needed that early pick. They got the early pick. And we have a question on this later, but the fact that Xavier Watts stepped up, not surprising at all that it was Xavier Watts. No one I know Kyron Williams had a 91-yard run against North Carolina. This was a spectacular play by Jeremiah Love at what I think, Pete, 80%. You've heard, right? You had heard 80% during the week.
Yeah, on Monday of game week, he sort of confided in someone that he was 70, 80%. On Wednesday, he had confided to that same person he was on 100. And
Then he got
I guess
sick.
we'll take it. I guess we'll take his word at it. As if he was not 100%, that is even more terrifying than that he did what he did. So I guess I half agree with Priester about like Notre Dame could have, should have scored 30 to 40. I thought Indiana's defense was actually really good.
No, they did a good job.
Yeah, so I give Indiana's defense a lot of credit for showing up because they had to play with one hand tied behind their backs because offensively they had no answer for Notre Dame's defensive line or Al Golden or Kirk Cignetti doing a Kirk Ferentz impression. Like there was nothing happening on that side of the ball. And it's like I feel like Notre Dame should have held them to single digits more than Notre Dame should have scored 40. I guess if
Yes,
I had to
I
say
agree.
like a coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah, what was it? Notre Dame finished with basically a 10-minute edge in time of possession, almost 35 to 25, something along those lines, I believe. So, yeah, I agree that Indiana's defense did an admirable job for as long as it was on the field. Also, think that when you see Notre Dame had a field goal blocked again, and then when you know how much Notre Dame lived in Indiana territory through the through much of the third quarter. That's why I think this game was far closer to being 34 to 10 than 27 to 17 being an accurate indicator of Notre Dame's dominance in the contest. I don't think, and maybe you might have also said this, Pete, post game Friday night. There was never a point where you felt like Notre Dame was going to lose that game. And personally, I didn't think there was a point where Notre Dame really felt overly threatened to be in a four-quarter game in that contest. Notre Dame had to figure some things out offensively against that well-coached IU defense, and that IU defense that was pretty active and had some dudes flying around. But just like Al Golden said, he left some stuff in his pocket near the end of the game when IU added some cosmetic brushstrokes. I tend to think that Denbrock called some stuff in the second half just fairly plainly to keep it going. Go ahead, Pete.
I was going to say, you know what that game reminded me of? Alabama in 2020. Like I think Notre Dame was like, well, we got games after this, and
Yes. Yeah, I
instead of
agree.
having to defend Najee Harris, we have Najee Harris. Like it felt like that kind of game to me. It was like, all right, Hayes in the barn here early in the third quarter. We're good. See you in New Orleans.
Yeah, point taken, Pete. No doubt. I mean, I'm looking at from a perspective of Notre Dame is their first two drives in the second half. They start at the Indiana 43. They're 7 of 13 on third down. I'm looking at from the Notre Dame perspective that you need to close those things out. But Indiana, look, people can say what they want to say about, and they're going to, about Indiana and whether they belonged or whatever. Their defense belonged, and I think that that was proven throughout the entire regular season. Um, they attack the line of scrimmage, and they're very good, and they made Notre Dame's offensive line look vulnerable, especially when they didn't have Spindler for the second half of the game at right guard. Some people have said that Denbrock, tightened things up. That's not really true. There was a sequence in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, where Leonard threw 6 out of 9 plays. I think there's a tendency to say that based upon the result that, he tightened it up when there isn't offensive production. But again, point taken, because Indiana's defense is good and Brian Haynes he does a really good job defensively.
I thought 2 shots total down the field ever was a kind of a sign that the weather was involved in the game plan.
Yeah,
And
and
hitting anything vertical is just it wasn't going to happen, so you weren't going to do it. That's why I meant I think they tightened it up and they got out there and they're like, "Ooh, I don't think we should try this right now. There's no way we're going to lose this game if we don't blow it." That's how I feel like they tightened it up.
And Tim, I kept
They're right.
insisting that I didn't think Leonard was making great decisions, on the zone read stuff. I think maybe some of that, and having now sat down and watched the TV version of it, I think maybe some of that was by design. We're going to run him when we need to, if the game's on the line. But of course, it was never on the line because they had a double-digit lead for the last almost 43 minutes of the game. So I think I think those are good points, and I think it's a combination of those things. I think if Notre Dame had felt like, maybe if it's a regular season game, they put the pedal to the metal because you're trying to impress. This is just all about advancing. JB?
The only thing I would like to add that I think might best illustrate the fact that Notre Dame never felt threatened in this game. Notre Dame goes for it on fourth down a hell of a lot of the time. They have basically every game this season. They average going for it on fourth down more than 2 times per game. They did not attempt a fourth down conversion on Friday night because Notre Dame never needed to.
Yeah, there are questions about Signetti that I know, in the second half. Pete, there's one directed at you that we can answer. I thought, for a guy that was as boastful and confident as he was, I thought he coached a pretty crappy game. I don't understand his decision making in several instances, and I think the moment seemed a little too big for him at times.
I agree. I mean, I give him slight credit for after the game, since he opened his press conference with like, it's hard to say goodbye to your kids at the end of the season, especially after they just watched their dad get his ass kicked. Because like that's what happened. It was just totally out of character from everything else they had done all season. And I think some of it is the moment, some of it is Notre Dame's offensive line, some of it is Curtis Rourke not playing very well. But I just thought the decisions that he made, I mean, it felt like this was going to be a home and home series, and like they get to host Notre Dame in Bloomington next week, and then they get to average out the scores to see who won. Like it was strange. In some ways, I go back to that Alabama game in 2020. It was like Notre Dame never took a shot in that game, which was like one of the most frustrating things about it. You knew Alabama was better, but it was like Notre Dame played not to lose in a game that meant you were 100% going to lose. I felt like Indiana played not to lose, which guaranteed they had no shot to win.
Yeah, Pete, when you were crowding into my space in the press box Friday night, we were discussing this very subject. And I said it reminded me of Notre Dame at Ohio State to start the 2022 season. It was a very let's do what we can to keep everything in front of us, keep it close from Indiana's approach, and maybe we'll get lucky and have some sort of wild shot in the fourth quarter, which was obviously never going to happen. But yeah, you looked. I thought Signetti coached at times like cosmetic appearances mattered, and they didn't matter in that game, and they're not going to matter. And again, that game was 27-3, way more than that game was 27-17.
I think a big part of Rourke's struggle is that he couldn't throw back shoulder throws to his receivers because Leonard Moore was out there, and Leonard Moore was not going to allow that to happen. He was extremely conscious of what they might try to do, and that part was taken away. They had, their slants, their up and in routes they're difficult to defend, but it didn't kill Notre Dame. Rourke was, I went back and Rourke completed, oh man, I don't have the number at my fingertips, like 73% of his passes against teams not named Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame. And against those three, it's like 59%. It's a step up in the game, man. It's going from AAA to major leagues.
I think it's going from single A to major leagues. Actually, that's what I was going to say. If you told me he did that against Michigan, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, 59, all right, well, what was he against? Give me Louisville, uh, Georgia Tech, and someone else. Did he complete 65% there? I don't know. They didn't play any of those teams. They played Nebraska.
Yeah.
Like that. They really, really had a weak schedule.
Yeah,
But
and I'm interested to see what their schedule is next year and their roster composition. Um,
yeah,
They have a schedule already. It's pretty tough.
oh, that's right. They do. Okay, so
Yeah,
Oregon
they go to
and Penn State
Oregon
are on
and
that.
Penn State.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
But I mean, full credit to them for. I mean, they had an awesome season. That was like the best season in Indiana football history. Like,
actually, Pete,
good job, guys.
I found, oh, they did a great job, but I found out post game during the Tennessee game that the wins don't matter. So wins don't matter. You just got to know who has the most talent.
Are you talking about Herb Street? Because we will
Yes, I
talk
am.
about that.
And
We'll
I'm on
talk
Nicole
about that
Auerbach's side that wins don't matter. Are you kidding me? Let's just make okay, then
I
the
saw
tournament starts in August.
I know. I just saw the video today. I'm astonished. I know where he's coming from.
Right.
What
But
he
wins do
said.
matter.
What wins? Yeah, wins do matter. And I don't want to. We'll talk about that in the second segment. My God, I mean, if then let's just the SEC and the upper echelon of the Big Ten should just break away and create their own league. If it's just going to be
They might.
wins don't matter. Well,
Yeah.
they might. They very well might. Yeah, no doubt. But it's it is what it is. We'll get into more of that in segment 2. Of course, I don't think devastating is too big of a word. I think it's devastating news that Riley Mills is out for the rest of the college football playoffs, as we said in the instant analysis, or at least I said this. I still think Notre Dame can beat Georgia because Georgia doesn't have their quarterback. Imagine Notre Dame going into this game without Riley Leonard. But winning a national title without an injured Riley Mills, I don't really see how that's possible as we sit here right now.
Yeah, it's. I think there's a difference. Which I would go as far to say, if Notre Dame had come through Indiana totally healthy, they should have beaten Georgia. Now I could still say they could beat Georgia, but that's a big difference between could and should. And like we don't cover a lot of Notre Dame versus Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama games where you say should. And I really think this could have been a should if Riley Mills was healthy.
That's how I feel, Pete. Exactly.
But I think it was coming down to an absolute dogfight no matter what, and I would sign up for Carson Beck to play with Riley Mills to play.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Which is a bigger blow?
No, I'd
That's
take
interesting.
they can lean. I think they can lean on Notre Dame now, but the way they wouldn't have been able to lean on Notre Dame, and that's what they want to do. It's tough. 4 of their best 15 players on the team aren't going to play, and they're all on defense. That's might be the bridge too far for me. Is you got Mills and Morrison are clearly in the top 8. Traore and Botello are clearly in the top 15. I mean, this is it's not even an arguable point, really. I just threw 15 out there so I wouldn't say 10. But I think it's going to hurt a lot. As I said, I think I said on instant analysis, I'd rather have Mills and Heinisch than Cross and Rubio and Heinisch. I think Mills against this team is important. That's maybe to your point, Tim. I feel like they might need him more against Georgia than they do in the next game.
I agree with that wholly, Tito.
Yeah.
And we teased this on instant analysis, so I'll just roll it out now. The Notre Dame, or I mean, excuse me, the Georgia starting O line left to right goes like 6'5", 315, 6'7", 315, 6'3", 310, 6'6", 320, 6'7", 320.
And it's
that's an average of
length.
3. Yeah, that's an average of 316 pounds per person on the OL, and they average, I believe, just a touch above 6'6" on that OL as well. They're going to be able to extend and kind of push off the Notre Dame D line, which the Notre Dame D line goes Donovan Heinisch 6'2", 280-ish. Howard Cross 6'1", 288. Joshua Burnham 6'4", 251. Rubio is 6'5", 316. Bryce Young 6'7", 258. And
You don't
then
need to do Open. It's fine.
yeah, I did. Oben 6'3", 265. So I'm glad you said that because I couldn't even remember who I was talking about when I had the big O initial next to his name right there. So I don't
I
know
thought
what that
Josh
says.
Burnham. I thought Josh Burnham played a good game on.
Burnham did play a good game, but look, it was going to be a very tough task, but one that you guys all alluded to. You felt like Notre Dame finally matched up much better for the task at hand against an SEC O line like Georgia's than in some of the previous ones had it been healthy. But without Riley Mills and the other guys that've been out extended time, I just think it's a really, really poor matchup for Notre Dame.
All right, wrapping up segment one, the other injury news, Rocco Spindler.
Again, this would be a game where Spindler, the dad, would help Notre Dame's defensive line.
No
Back
doubt
healthy.
about that.
That would be
No doubt about that. Rocco Spindler listed as questionable for this game. Pendleton obviously will start there if Spindler's not ready to go. The news is that Charles Jagasa is practicing, but as you pointed out, Tim, well, as Marcus Freeman said, he hasn't really practiced yet. I mean, he was on the field when we saw him last Monday. He will just, yeah. I mean, that's not a
great news for the spring. He will now compete 100% to try to start in the spring. Yeah.
And the other good news, Kingston Villiama is at least now listed as questionable. He was out for the Indiana game. So, Rubio starts at tackle. Mukum has to get involved. Maybe Sevillano in some respects, although he's mainly been a nose tackle.
I mean, I think Sevillano could give a couple snaps at nose with Howard Cross at defensive tackle, too.
No, it's true. And I think you make a good point. I mean, when you just talk about big, strong behemoths, that's what you lose in Mills, and that's not what, Cross beats you with quickness, not just size and strength. So it's a blow, but we'll continue to talk about this and other things about Notre Dame, Georgia, and a little bit Notre Dame, Indiana as well in second segment. 'Tis the season of giving, so the secret ESQ sale lives on. Use code Irish Illustrated and get 25% off all online items through Christmas, not valid on gift cards or custom items. You better hurry. Check out ESQ's award-winning dress shirt on your favorite players and coaches and give the gift of style. If you're visiting Chicago, explore all of ESQ's bespoke options. With more than a decade of creating handmade bespoke clothing, ESQ's tailoring expertise will craft a garment as unique as you. That's ESQclothing.com. Coming up, segment 2, burning up the boards.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit GameDayYourWay.com.
Welcome back to segment 2, burning up the boards. Our first question, and it's one we all want to know the answer to. TJ from PA 70. What do you make of the post-game handshake between Marcus Freeman and Signetti? Did Marcus hear some things he didn't like leading up to the game, or did something happen during the game to draw his ire?
I told you guys I was hoping somebody would ask it today, but I wasn't going to use one of my questions on that because that's just not significant enough to ask or to use.
Because it wouldn't be answered. That's why.
Yeah. Well, that as well. We each get 2 questions, and I had a different route I wanted to go. But Marcus Freeman certainly did not look like he wanted to spend additional time with a Kurt Signetti after the game.
I don't know who does.
And if I'm Marcus Freeman, I would absolutely feel the same way. The guy's calling out Notre Dame after the game with Notre Dame has been scheduled. It's one thing to call him out before, like you even know what who's playing where, but he calls him out after it's been scheduled,
right.
Or calls Notre Dame out and says, these 1-loss teams, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. And Tim, what else did he say?
That was related to why are they hosting us? Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. We lost to Ohio State.
We should be hosting. You got to be kidding me. So, I mean, the question was not asked. maybe we'll find out through back channels, but I certainly wouldn't blame Marcus Freeman for feeling that way,
I'm sure
nor
he's
do
pretty
I
happy to tell
blame.
you through back channels
Yeah,
or
yeah,
just off the record. Yes.
yeah.
I wish someone could have asked Signetti or Marcus, hey, why didn't you buy out your Louisville game since the other team that says it should be hosting in the playoff bought out its Louisville game and replaced it with an
Yeah.
FCS opponent early in the year? It didn't look like Freeman had any interest. I wonder if it also could have stemmed from Signetti's brashness on game day
I wonder.
from South Bend, from the Notre Dame campus. He did not tone down whatsoever his commentary about how they beat the asses of top 25 teams. So I think it was
Unbelievable.
probably a cocktail mixture of ingredients that made Marcus Freeman perform a perfunctory handshake and go celebrate.
What do you think,
Yeah,
Pete?
I think that Marcus Freeman heard all of that stuff and is somebody who gives a reaction to him on like that's fine. Like I think he hears all that stuff. And I think Signetti is probably a pretty easy guy not to like.
And then he goes out and he coaches a crap game.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
like Indiana needed Kurt Signettiness from the moment he took over till they made the playoff. You're supposed to have arrived a little bit at that point. You're going and insulting the team that's close to you and the coach. All right. You're not infallible. Nick Saban tells you you're not infallible with his comments to you. Pride cometh before the fall. And he fell hard. And he deserved it. And he got bundled and sent back down to the JV, is what it looked like. Kurt Signetti can have class too. I know we're in a world now where the class is a dumb word. Everybody laughs when he says we beat the shit out of him. First, you don't beat the shit out of him. You're James Madison in Coastal Carolina, right? Top 25. Who cares? You played 2 games and you got your asses kicked. Both games. And you wimped out. Other than the
With
defense,
Louisville.
the defense tried hard
Yeah.
against Ohio State too. The offense and Kurt Signetti wimped out.
Well, and it rubbed off on the fan base that was
And the
in Notre
punter.
Dame Stadium, which we will, yeah, which we will talk about with a later question. But as a former coach that didn't appeal to my opposing coaches sometimes, I know I know a little bit about what it's like to be the Signetti, and it's not a good look.
I
It's
will
not
be referring to you as the Signetti
the
from here on out.
Signetti. It's not a good look.
You know, it is a good look is putting Shane Gillis on game day because that was awesome.
Oh God, that was Notre Dame's first win against Alabama since 1987.
Alabama Jones is
Oh my God, it was amazing. It's rare when Notre Dame comes off as like cool. Shane Gillis, yeah,
Yes.
you're getting Notre Dame into the cool factor there.
We have a question from Irish from A2. Did the offensive game plan against Indiana and play calling have anything to do with Georgia being the next opponent?
Yeah, I think very strongly it
Yes.
did. I think we were talking about how this game reminded, or Pete said this reminded him of 2020 Notre Dame versus Bama, or I said 2022 Notre Dame opening at Ohio State in terms of all of that. As I sat here and thought about it and looked over the questions, there were moments of the second half that reminded me of a blue gold game. Like I thought it was very clear. Notre Dame was like, our boys are better than your boys, and we're just going to play some base stuff, and we're going to get out of here with a double-digit win, and we're on to New Orleans, and you're on to Mother Bear's Pizza because your season's over.
I've had 2 sources tell me this, that Georgia's staff started watching Notre Dame and Indiana film and quickly stopped watching Indiana film early last week because they're like, okay, they're not winning. And so when Kirby Smart mistakenly referred to Indiana as Purdue on College Game Day, that I'm not saying he intentionally did it, but it was definitely a tell about how Georgia felt about Indiana versus Notre Dame.
That's outstanding. We always make that joke about I'm not going to name the player, but we make the joke about the 2012 Notre Dame offense. Pete Sampson and I have always said that you imagine handing this over to one of the Alabama defensive backs and saying, "Hey, here's some offensive tape." That's all right, coach. I'm okay.
We're good.
We're good. I'm ready to go.
I did think that, he Riley Leonard had 11 carries. There were 2 sacks, so he had 9 carries. And I just remember, you guys get sick of hearing me. You guys were Tim and Pete were on each side of me with JB to the left
But we
of
were all
Pete.
within
You
5
get
feet of each other. That was a fun press
Oh
box.
yeah, we were packed tight in the press box this time, and you get tired of hearing, I'm sure, the things I'm saying are my breath, but I kept thinking, okay, Leonard's going to run now. Leonard's going to run now, and he didn't, and that's when you start to think, okay, they're not pressing all the buttons they would in a game that was hotly contested. And then the flip side of that is he takes a few less hits,
Yes.
over the course of the game, and with 11 days to get ready for Georgia. So yeah, and answer the question, I think we all feel like they dialed it back a little bit because it just wasn't necessary to show some of the stuff they have. Question from Denver Maximus. It was mentioned once earlier in the year. What is the breaking point of this team? Yes, there is depth, but the depth is out on the field, and there are positions with barely anyone behind them, especially at cornerback and D line. Does Notre Dame have enough to keep pushing forward? Let the record show this question was submitted before we were told that Riley Mills would not be playing against Georgia.
I think this
Yeah,
is
we're there.
Yeah, I think we're at the breaking point.
Yeah, it's like O'Malley and I were having a bridge too far conversation on the way out of the stadium today. And to Notre Dame's credit, like I think that we both felt like they had already hit the bridge too far, like with Traore and Vitello, and then Morrison. But I mean, it's like, okay, there was not a bridge too far to beat Virginia or Army or Georgia Tech with its backup quarterback. This is a different kind of
Yeah,
situation.
I'm going to say bridge too far for a national title because they're about to play a team that lost their starting quarterback, and people can talk about, Gunnar Stockton.
We're
It's
about to.
I know. Yeah. I mean, oh, okay. Yeah. The next question is
Next
from
question.
K Beasley. Are we better off facing Gunnar Stockton than Carson Beck, and why? I don't believe that. I know that Carson Beck has thrown 12 interceptions. There's also only 7 quarterbacks in the country that have thrown more passes than he did. I've seen film of many of his bad decisions. I get that, but this is a proven quarterback. And you know what? I did a CBS hit with the 24/7 Jordan Hill, I believe it is, who does the Georgia site. And I didn't mention, Gunnar Stockton threw for almost 14,000 yards in high school. I'm not saying he's a stiff. I'm just saying he doesn't have experience, and he's about to go against the L Golden coach defense. That's not better than, I don't think that that's better than playing against Carson Beck, who's thrown a billion passes,
I don't either.
seen it all.
I don't either, but I think Riley Mills.
JB, maybe you feel differently about that.
Well, look, I'm not at all very smart, but I try to be smart enough to the people that are smarter than me to listen to them. And so I will defer to multiple coaches now that have reached out to me that are emphatic that they believe Georgia right now is a better football team with Gunnar Stockton because Beck maybe had gotten in his own head a little bit with some of the picks. And yeah, you can't price tag the experience differential between Beck and Gunnar Stockton. But what I would note is Gunnar Stockton's a redshirt sophomore, so he's in year 3 of being a Georgia backup quarterback, which means through the years he's still gotten some decent opportunities to play. I mean, he's appeared in 8 career games, and we know that he led Georgia to the win it needed against Texas to be the number 2 host and to get to have a more favorable path and to have not had to play in that opening round. I think when you sit there and look at all the strides Notre Dame has made, and you've heard me say repeatedly, it's an SEC offensive line, it's an SEC backfield. Right now, as it's comprised, it's certainly as elite, a top level quarterback room, I believe, is just about anywhere 1 through 4. And on the defensive side, they've been an SEC type secondary, an SEC linebacking core with the way they've upgraded their athleticism and ability, but they haven't been there on the defensive line. They were close to open the year when you had Mills and Cross fully healthy and Botello and Traore flashing and coming along. But to me, D-line is one of the areas, along with wide receiver, where Notre Dame has lacked being in that upper echelon of teams. And now you subtract three significant pieces from it over the course of this season, including the single most significant piece. Look, Notre Dame's playoff quest, to me, rested on the Rileys, Leonard and Mills, and now half of that equation's gone. And I think it's a terrible matchup for Notre Dame because of that.
I'm interested. Just like I get the Beck Stockton stuff that you're talking about, John. I'm just interested in like, okay, Georgia built its offense around being a pass first team. So then you flip in Gunner Stockton. Like it's certainly not as easy as being like, okay, we're run first now. Because that's how I think you're going to have to play it with Stockton.
They're a
I
bad
don't know.
rushing. They are a bad rushing team.
Yeah, so I mean, they were a pass first
end
team in
matters.
part because of Beck's strengths, but also because of the weaknesses that they had. So I don't know. I guess I have a hard time being like they're better off with Gunnar Stockton than Carson Beck, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm saying, look, coaches have unsolicited shared that opinion with me as they've asked me about what I see in the playoffs or whatever, or even going into this past weekend's opening round. And then that just opened up dialogue. And so I have found it interesting that coaches have sort of volunteered that they believe Georgia may be better off. One thing to note, Georgia has had injuries along its offensive line and to Etienne over the course of this season. I think that's dramatically hampered the running game. But if they're close to whole against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame now we know definitively does not have Riley Mills. I mean, again, Tate Ratledge is viewed as an NFL guy, and he's their right guard who runs 6'6", 320. And again, I've already enumerated the sizes of the other guys. They have multiple guys on their offensive line that are now seen as NFL draft picks. I'm not saying they're seen as first-round draft picks, but you change the equation dramatically with no Riley Mills for Notre Dame.
T.O.?
I'd rather have the option of having Beck and Stockton on my team if I'm Kirby Smart. I don't think you're better off right away making a full switch like that. Is it? I mean, who is it? Is JB is Rashada their third string quarterback? The transfer from Arizona State? Because he wouldn't be part of anybody's depth chart if Carson Beck was playing this game. I would rather. I know this does happen, and there's sometimes where the young quarterback probably should have been playing over the veteran. I want to see Stockton against Al Golden more than I want to see Carson Beck against Al Golden.
Sure.
I think Notre Dame does pretty well against running QBs, though the best running QB they could have played didn't play this year. So I mean that would have been a true matchup of running with Haynes King, of course.
See that it's because of this is why I say I'm not ready to say a bridge too far as it relates to this game. I know it's the loss
it is for the
is
3 games,
huge.
but not necessarily.
Yeah, I know, but I know it's huge for Georgia. I mean, it could prove to be significant. I'm just not ready to say bridge too far with that.
I was to say Carson Beck would have been the best quarterback Notre Dame faced all year. Like I don't think it's close.
There you
and
go.
Like Tyler Shuck threw 3 scores against them when Notre Dame was much healthier. So
he played well though, man.
He balled out.
Yeah.
I mean, Mayava again, 350 and three touchdowns. Carson Beck could. I don't know. I think Carson Beck would have pushed Notre Dame in a way that Gunnar Stockton will not.
Well, I would just also think that it's noteworthy to add Carson Beck didn't go out this weekend over the course of the opening round of playoff games, and Georgia only has 10 days to pivot to Gunnar Stockton. Georgia will have had almost 4 weeks to pivot to Gunnar Stockton and get him ready. Yeah. And in relief of Carson Beck in that game against Texas to win the SEC championship, he completed 12 of 16 passes just for 71 yards, and he had a pick, but he also was credited with 8 rushes for 27 positive yards, and then he lost a bunch on sacks, but he had a long run of 9. So I do think that there's a difference there. It's not sudden change, so to speak, that they're having to pivot to Gunnar Stockton. They've had, by the time kickoff rolls around, damn near a month to pivot and prepare with Gunnar Stockton.
We know he can take a hit too. Holy smokes.
Oh, he got drilled. He got drilled.
He didn't come back in that game. Well, technically, there's only one
No,
more
that
play.
yeah.
So
Oh, that's right. Yeah. See, that hasn't. Well, he's got plenty of time to recover, whether it was
yeah,
concussion. He got drilled. Stockton did. Anyway, we need to move on. Amos Irish 03 for Pete Sampson. Do you still think Indiana was a really great team? I'm just putting in my own emphasis for you there, Pete. Because of the so-called analytics, and Signetti is the quote best coach that Notre Dame will play all season because of beating inferior opponents throughout his entire career. Have you ever seen a coach talk so much and coach so scared?
I've not seen a coach talk so much and coach so scared. He's also 63-11 in his last 6 years. But I guess I'd probably give the nod to Jeff Monken, who Notre Dame beat 49-14. So Notre Dame's they were a lot better than Indiana. I think the idea that Signetti is like a fraud or sucks as a coach is a bit ridiculous. It's freaking
No, he's
Indiana. They
annoying.
went
There's a
11
difference
and
between
1.
there's a difference between being annoying and not liked by a fan base. There's a
Yeah.
difference between being a great coach. I mean, he's a heck of a coach.
Yeah,
He
the
just-
like the analytics on Indiana have nothing to do with Signetti's personality. They led the country in scoring margin. Like if that I don't know, if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what
Look,
will. That doesn't mean they're like we're a national title contender.
Look, from our perspective at Irish Illustrated, I'm tired of having to apologize for pointing out the good things about an opponent. I mean, Indiana had a great year. Did Notre Dame expose them? Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't change the fact that Indiana went 11-1 when they've in 100 years, they've been over 525 times. Notre Dame schooled them. We get that. But Notre Dame or Indiana had a very good year and Signetti did a great job. Okay. Two things can be right at once. And that's what this is. And we at Irish Illustrated are always going to tell you the good things about the opponent so you don't blame Notre Dame for everything that's bad that happens to them, which we don't ever get through to a lot of people, and that they blame Notre Dame for everything anyway. But we are analyzing football teams, and Indiana had a great year, and they were exposed by a bedrock college football program.
Our next question is from Maltese Irish. Do you think Indiana rushing to get a playoff before Elijah Surratt's bobbling acrobatic catch could be reviewed could contribute to Rourke throwing that pick to Watts?
Oh, we already said that. Like I hammered home that point on overtime. What would have been Saturday morning? So I understand if the question
Maltese might have been asleep during that one.
But Maltese is a consistent contributor. Yeah, I firmly believe it did. I think everything about that was rushed. They were probably lucky that they didn't end up with a false start penalty. And then, yeah, I think that whole sequence was rushed because I thought and told Pete, like, I can't believe they're not even reviewing it. And I looked at some photos that we had from our photographer who shot the game for Football Scoop, Stephen Kinney, and they were a little out of focus. They were a little soft, but you could see the ball laying like between his legs, and I'm not sure it ever touched the turf. But I did think it would be reviewed in a game the magnitude of the college football playoff, and I do think that IU absolutely hurried everything about its operations, and that sped up Rourke's decision making, and he made a really bad decision.
Yeah. The TV version never showed exactly.
Well, that's
happened,
how quick I made that point. Indiana was so rushing to get the playoff so that it couldn't be reviewed that TV cut short the one replay it was going to show because it had to get back to live action.
Nothing drives me more crazy than a red zone first down interception. Nothing.
I was just going to give credit to Jack Kaiser the way he played that because you didn't. I think it was Jordan Clark was defending the slot receiver behind. Like Jordan Clark didn't even need to be there. Jack Kaiser took that whole thing away.
Yeah,
and that was a hell of a play by a linebacker.
That was well done. Question from ND Dan 106. Any update on the transfer portal players Notre Dame hosted Friday night? I was going to have one of you guys ask this, but I know Malachi Fields. I know the name Malachi Fields has been out there. There's a reason for that. There's been dialogue between Notre Dame and Fields, and they're monitoring the situation. I think Notre Dame feels good about them landing them from outside looking in. I think it looks good about Notre Dame landing him. He is a he has comparable size, a little bit more. He's 6'4", 220, so he's a little bit bigger than Bo Collins, but he's a lot tougher than he is. In 2024, Fields caught 55 passes, 14.7 yards per catch, and 5 touchdowns, and almost identical last year, 58 catches, 14 yards per reception, and 5 touchdowns. Now, of course, Notre Dame's already gotten Devontae Smith, the nickel defensive back, who's a physical football player. We'll see what happens with Malachi Fields. There will be others, and we'll discuss them when the situation arises.
Yeah, I still think Notre Dame gets between 5 and 7 dudes out of the portal.
I think they go even higher than that. But I
I
will
think
say,
they'll go higher than that too.
yeah,
But
I will say one thing that Marcus Freeman said today that applies to Malachi Fields. He trusts Mickens' evaluation. He's learned to trust Mickens' evaluation. I bet you Mickens said something to Marcus Freeman after they played Virginia.
by the way, he
That
caught
guy right there.
against Notre
This
Dame. He caught,
podcast said something about
Yes,
that.
we did. This podcast, hey, X things to say. I already transferred him out of his place by the time that game ended. There was no, but I bet you Mickens had glowing reports on film for
four catches, 81 yards, so he averaged 20 yards per catch against Notre Dame with a long of 38. Against Louisville, he had 9 catches for 129 yards. Against Wake Forest, he had 11 catches for 148 yards.
I wrote him down for his blocking in X things to say, not even his 4 catches.
Great size, very competitive athlete. Hopefully Notre Dame can land him. Question from Statman72. If it is based on what you saw this past weekend, could you opine on the 4 teams who played and won their opening round games?
In the sense of like who is the best?
Yeah, I mean, just your thoughts on Ohio State and Penn State
I feel
and
like
Texas.
Ohio State now was like, oh yeah, that's the best team in the country, maybe. I thought what Ohio State did on Saturday was like terrifying, and good that they're on the other side of the bracket as it pertains to Notre Dame. I don't think I had any grand takeaways from Penn State and Texas though. But Ohio State clearly was the best looking team this weekend. And I think that Oregon, Ohio State would have been a great national championship game, but here we are in the quarterfinals, so it's that one instead.
Yeah, I think that Clemson, Texas felt a lot like Indiana, Notre Dame. I don't think Texas ever felt really threatened in that contest. Clemson's probably a better team than Indiana, but that's how I gauged that game. I took a lot of abuse from some of my friends in East Tennessee when O'Malley had a great playoff preview primer content piece on 247 and asked me to participate and asked me everyone. He asked everyone, not just me. I'm not special. He asked everyone who they thought would have their worst, which team would have the worst playoff performance, and I said Tennessee, and I believed it and I felt it, and they proved me correct on Saturday night in Columbus. They were outmatched and outclassed in that game, and it would have been a lot worse if that one interception that got reviewed and the play didn't get confirmed. It stood because Ohio State was about to be up 28-3 in the first half at that point. I said going in, I felt Ohio State is the most talented team. Yeah. They were coached better, and a lot of the motivational work, as I alluded to, had been completely done for Ryan Day because that team had heard for 3 weeks how much they sucked for losing to Michigan. And all of that just added up to a recipe of disaster. Kevin Jennings, I'm surprised. Like I would.
Oh, what a rough day!
Wow. I would have been interested to see SMU. Just I said on this podcast last week that I thought Penn State would bully SMU, and it did. But you wonder if SMU could have at least made it a game into the third quarter or something, and it was incapable of doing that. And so that masks the fact that Drew Aller again was fairly pedestrian in the game, 13 of 22 for like less than 130 passing yards. Now, he didn't need to, so you wonder if Kurt Ciaroca kept a lot in his bag the same way that we believe Al Golden and Mike Denbrock kept in their bags. That was sort of my evaluation on that. Penn State got the worst opening round opponent, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, and continues to benefit from somewhat of a gilded path.
I saw 4 Clemson plays inside the 5-yard line. They all gained the same number of yards. If people want to get mad at a coach and play caller, because that was a 7-point game. if you go in there. That was shocking. That last fourth down call was
It was. It was.
beautiful in its
Yeah.
idiocy. Yeah, I felt the tackling on the second pick six for SMU was indicative of they weren't even they couldn't compete with Penn State. It was the worst tackling I've ever seen after a pick. What in the world? The second pick six, picked
Yeah.
off at the 45-yard line, should have been tackled at the 44, and then the 40, and then the 35, and then the 25, and then the 15, and maybe even that diving 400-pound lineman at the two. That was just like you're watching, you're like SMU's defense fought the good fight for a while, and then it's over. You can't be out there forever. And the Tennessee game, their fans traveled, man. They took over
Yeah.
that stadium in Orange. Ohio State's fans should be ashamed forever. What a travesty of a program the athletic director must be running. All orange in the stadium. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I talked to a few different people. Chris Lowe, my buddy from ESPN, was there. 35 to 40,000. He felt for sure 35,000 Tennessee
Unbelievable.
fans. And look, to Notre Dame's credit, on the ticket issue, I didn't think there was that much red in Notre Dame Stadium, but more importantly, to Notre Dame's credit, the fans who embraced this game, those prices held. They're the only ones that held and stayed at a premium price all the way through. By Saturday morning, you could get into the Ohio State Tennessee game for below face value. It had dropped not as low as the $48 and below that tickets were going for SMU Penn State, but that game had dropped to around a $60 ticket for some modestly decent seats in the 12 hours before kickoff.
We have a question from Sully Patrick. Georgia had a hard time against the run with Georgia Tech quarterback Haynes King. Should Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard use a similar game plan? Haynes King is a handful, man.
Yes, and I'm glad he's
He
not
is.
Georgia quarterback. I can tell you that much.
Holy crap, he is good.
And that Georgia Tech offensive line is one of the oldest and most
It
physical
is. It's a
this
good
season
line.
in all of college football. So I wouldn't ignore that component. And also, Georgia always wants to beat Georgia Tech, but Georgia knew that game had no bearing really on its playoff fate because it was not going to get left out had it lost to Texas in the SEC championship. It might have ended up the 11 seed instead of an 8 or 9 seed had it beaten Georgia Tech and then lost the SEC title game, whatever. But I don't think Georgia Tech got Georgia's best effort in that contest. But yes, Haynes King was problematic for the Bulldogs all night long, and you have to think that Riley Leonard can potentially pose some similar problems
And
as
that
well.
and that was my Pete, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was on Greg McElroy's show, and we were talking about the Georgia Notre Dame matchup a couple weeks ago, and he was like, "I think Notre Dame's got a great shot." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Georgia's defense struggles with quarterback run and vertical run,
Yes.
just like quick hitting, boom up the middle, go." And that's like kind of how Notre Dame's built. So
I include this question because because I think Haynes, certainly Riley Leonard has a similar ability to him. Haynes King was 26 of 36 for 303 yards and 2 touchdowns with no interceptions against Georgia, and he ran 24 times for 110 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's a better all-around thrower of the football than Riley Leonard is, and comparable, of course, in the running game. But man, you think 36 passes and 24 runs, that's 60 plays. 60 plays.
the game did go on forever.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's true. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes, it was 8 overtimes. That had something to do with it. But most of those snaps were from the 2-yard line. So, yeah, no, I think Georgia's defense is vulnerable. I really do. I think Riley Leonard and Notre Dame's offense can do some damage against them if, it's complementary football. You've got to be able to be stout on the defensive line, and Notre Dame's a hell of a lot less stout without Riley Mills.
Mike,
Yeah, and one quick thing I would add. Sorry, T.O., I apologize. I was just going to say one quick thing, much like I just noted that Ryan Day had a lot of his job done for him the last 3 weeks from external motivating factors. Don't forget, Kirby Smart's the same guy that 2 years ago convinced his Georgia team that everybody thought they sucked and that they'd been predicted to lose 5 games. And they were the most dominant team in college football and won the national title 63-7. I would bet you money that Kirby Smart has been telling his team they're underdogs against Notre Dame. Everybody thinks Notre Dame's going to beat you. I think that that's another element from a mental standpoint that does not favor Notre Dame in this game.
Final
Kirby
question.
Smart can make a villain out of anybody, though.
That's what I'm saying, though. He
And
can't.
he does a good
I know,
job of
but
it.
he's
Like
gifted at
full
it.
credit.
Yeah, he's
like
gifted at
you
it.
may just you may just be completely full of it, but like he does a good job of being convincing in this full of itness.
Yeah, that's entirely my point. You just said it a hell of a lot better than me, Pete. I cede the floor. And I'm
Final
sorry.
question. Sorry. Final question from True Sophomore. With the performance of visiting teams in the first round and judging by the scores, do you think there needs to be fewer teams in the college football playoff? What criteria would you place more emphasis on?
Yes, I think there should be fewer teams because when there was a 4-team format, Oregon lost, Florida State lost by 39 to Oregon. Oklahoma lost by 20 to Clemson. Mississippi, Michigan State lost to Alabama by 38. Notre Dame lost to Clemson by 27. Oklahoma lost to LSU by 35. So there should have just picked 2 teams at the end. I like
use a computer.
maybe.
Nice.
Well, there were complaints about that when they used to do
Yes.
that. I get that. I get that. But if you just want to take, because we don't trust any of the human element, because no matter who is picked, it's always wrong. But more teams, less teams, there are blowouts in the playoffs. It doesn't matter. Actually the blowouts this past weekend were not as substantial as many of the ones that I just said. We had a national championship game in which Georgia won by 58. Maybe they shouldn't even play a championship game.
They don't have to if you just got start in August with Herb Street. He'll figure it out for you right away. There's no. I think Ole Miss won. I think Ole Miss won. I think Ole Miss has already won it. It's over.
That's The best tweets were like after this weekend, the SEC is now 1,000,000 in hypothetical matchups that are never played.
No, the best tweet was Michael Jordan was a pretty good basketball player, but we're not sure how good because he didn't play in the SEC.
The SEC should just secede from the union and just say this is our.
They've tried that before.
I know, but just determine your champion, and then when you're done determining that you're the best in the world,
yeah.
Which look, they win most of the national championships, so I get that. But then they can play the winner of whatever. I don't know. They would probably want Ohio State to join. Look, whoever spends the most. Let's just have the teams that spend the most money play.
Nice, we're in. Irish are going to be in soon. Then
Yeah, that's true.
Really fast.
They're not right now. Then since you're bringing it up, I'd have to think. But Notre Dame's payroll in this playoff with the 8 teams left standing, obviously it's more than Boise. It's probably
or the Arizona State,
or Arizona
State, and more than Arizona State. It's not. It's half or less of Ohio State. It's half or less of Oregon, and it's right around half, maybe a little more than half of Georgia. I think Georgia is in the $14-15 million range based on what some SEC general managers have told me. So, Notre Dame may be getting there.
We got we got told that Notre Dame was in the $14-15 million range recently.
No, that's
with Notre Dame's endowment. They have half.
I heard they were in the $14-15 million range. But my point was going to be, there's blowouts in every tournament. You thought adding teams was going to make it more competitive?
I like it.
I thought adding teams
we've all said
more competitive.
We've all said this is the year that there's not an overwhelmingly dominant college football team. Now, the opening games played out the way they played, but we'll see it at 14 or 16 before we'll see it contracted.
Oh yeah, they're not going to contract. Not every loss is a referendum for the way something goes.
No, we want to blow up the system after one weekend. By the way, I'm kidding about the endowment. People always refer to the endowment and how that has nothing to do with this. But look, there's no perfect system. There never has been, and there never will be. And apparently, there are going to be blowouts, whether it's 4 teams, 12 teams. We don't know about 14 or 16 yet.
There's never been a blowout in a 2-team playoff. I mean, when it was just the championship game.
I can't think of one example.
I can't think of one single one. Can you guys?
That's why just don't even play a championship. Just have Herb Street vote on it in August, and we're good.
I think
Guys
Shannon
don't-
Sharp might have something to say about
Ooh, yeah,
Herb
I
Street's
just
the
saw
only
that a little
voice.
bit. That's a thing.
I did
got
not.
that-
I did not hear what he said.
give
Oh,
me
he
like-
basically challenged him to a fight.
yeah.
He said, yeah, he basically told Kirk he can catch these hands.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
First of
that
all,
was
I
when
want.
Kirk went off on the lunatic fringe in the Ohio State fan base during the broadcast of the Tennessee game, which was also kind of like, ooh, this is kind of fun.
Just had a little
Kirk-
test, didn't it?
Kirk Herbstreit is he's a legend in our industry.
We
He
don't
is.
have to qualify it. He said something
I-
dumb. Wins don't
I
count.
understand. I understand that, but I don't want to come off sounding like I think he's wrong here, but he's a legend in his field, and a lot of people just completely discount everything he says, and I think that's wrong because he's done an incredible job. But if we're not going to count wins, then I don't. What are we doing here? I guess is what it comes down to. All right. What we're doing here is we're checking out. This has been a
Merry
long Irish
Christmas.
Illustrated Insider. Merry Christmas to everybody. Merry Christmas to you guys. Thanks for joining us podcast after podcast, and keep listening because we're going to have a whole bunch more as Notre Dame prepares for Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Thanks for joining us. Merry Christmas. This has been Irish Illustrated Insider.